due to this one man, and we owe him an awful lot. We should pay him the highest tributes for coming up here. It's a grand honor to welcome Fred Bear.
Thanks very much. Fred, I appreciate the fine introduction. There are a lot of real nice fellows named Fred, in spite of the fact that it's a four-letter word, which Bear is also, and it's quite a weight that I carry around on my shoulders. We're going to have a little fun tonight. I'll be finished. It'll take about 2 or 3 hours. So settle back, unbuckle your belts, and open your ties, and we'll get to it. But before we get into the fun thing, I want to get a little serious for a few minutes. I want to talk about the decline in the quality of the ability of sportsmen to lie. I'm real serious about this. When I was a kid, if a fella said he caught a fish 3 feet long, you could bet your last dollar that it wasn't a bit over 12 inches. If you shot a deer that weighed 300 pounds, you could bet your life also that it probably was a spotted fawn. And sportsmen or outdoorsmen have been traditionally known to be good liars. And I think we've fallen far short, and I'm on a campaign to improve the quality of these things that I talk about. I am suggesting that nobody ever set foot in the woods without an alibi already prepared. You can get caught short. Now, and I take it back to George Washington. You know, he cut down the cherry tree. And his father, caught him. And he said, "George, did you cut down the tree?" He was absolutely without alibi. And he said, "Yes, Father, I can't tell a lie. I did cut down the cherry tree." Well, he was later to become president, and imagine the guy, president, who can't tell a lie. He could have said, if he'd been prepared, "Yeah, I just came around the corner of the house and I saw a beaver run off in the woods there, and here's all the chips." But he was caught flat-footed. And during my early boyhood, and George Gardner's also, one of the pranks the kids did at Halloween was to push over an outhouse. Now, I realize that it's hard to find an outhouse nowadays, but in those days you always could find some kind of a facility in the back of the house. And this young lad pushed over the outhouse, and his dad happened to come around the corner, and he saw him kind of running off, and he later apprehended him, and he said, "Did you push the outhouse over?" And the kid said, "Yes, Father, I cannot tell a lie. I pushed the outhouse over, relying on this George Washington business, And his father beat the hell out of him. And after he could get his breath back, he said, "Well, Dad, George Washington cut down the tree." And he said, "Father, I can't tell a lie. I cut down the tree, and I pushed over the outhouse and say the same thing, and you give me a beating." And the father said, "Well, George Washington probably wasn't in the tree when his father when he cut it down." So, and really, when I saw you folks shooting at the hat, I couldn't help but think that these people whose hats you were shooting at probably were the ones that had no alibi. And I think if you were honest, you'd find, and I asked for a show of hands, you'd find a lot of hands go up from people who should have had their hats shot out this afternoon. All right. So much for that. I hope you'll bear with me on there and see if we can improve our ability to lie better. We owe that. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit. I've made a number of films. I made 4 films for the ABC American Sportsman, and the first one was a grizzly hunt. I went to New York and sold them on the idea. I felt that there should be some bow hunting in some of these ABC American Sportsman films, and I had arrangements made to go up in the Kispiox to a place where I'd hunted 4 times before on a grizzly hunt that fall. And I sold them on the idea, and I was a little bit not too sure of myself when I did, because I didn't know what I was getting into. What I really got into was taking a crew of 10 people and a ton of equipment up into the wilds of British Columbia and shooting a polar bear in front of or a grizzly bear in front of the camera. And I'm telling you, that's all right to talk about, and if it's months away, but when the time comes, you got to do it. You got a job in your hands. And I'd been up there, as I said, 4 times before. I knew exactly what I was getting into in terms of the conditions and the outfitters. And we arrived in camp. It was a 45-minute bush flight with all this equipment, cameras and backup cameras, films, battery chargers, everything. And we had a director and a producer and a writer and a coordinator and a sound man and 4 cameramen. We had a total of 10. And how am I going to get this whole gang up to and shoot a grizzly bear in front of the camera? Now, that's real serious business, because grizzly bears aren't dumb. Well, I finally figured out the only way to do it is to bait a bear. And baiting was legal at that time. We're talking about the early 60s. I had the outfitter bring in a horse that was destined for the glue factory, and we shot the horse in a location that we selected very carefully where there was a known wind direction, usually. We built a platform for the camera crew across a creek about 70 yards from the horse, which we said was a moose that the bear had clawed down. We thought that sounded a little better than bait. Well, anyhow, we had to build a very heavy platform because we had 3 big cameras up there, 3 camera operators, and a sound man. And it was about as high as this ceiling. We had a ladder going up. We felled a big spruce tree across the creek and trimmed the top branches, and that was our bridge. And the grizzly bears like their food tender and right. And it was 10 days before Grizzly made his appearance. We went in with the cameras, a very obnoxious Englishman. His name was Alan Bendig. As a matter of fact, the whole crew were New Yorkers. And I tell you, if you don't come from New York, you don't know anything. And they thought that you can just walk around like trying to herd cows or something, crack sticks and all this and that, and it was really horrible. But with this arrangement that I'd set up, there wasn't much that they could do. It was wrong. Well, the bear came in, and I missed the bear. I had decided that I could not, at least not on this first attempt at national network television, shoot a bear and have him run out of sight before he expired. I felt that I should pile him right up in the spot, and I was using number 10 microflight arrows at the time. No, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about an elephant. I made some arrows, some hickory arrows that were very heavy, and I'm going to break his neck. And I missed his neck, and he ran off. Well, all right. It was late in the afternoon, and the producer looked through a couple of little glasses, and he said to me, "Will the bear be back tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm the expert," and I said, "Yeah, he'll be back." And he said, "Well, wrap it up." Well, we went to camp. It's only about a mile from camp. And put tarps on the cameras and went to camp. And we knew for sure that no self-respecting bear, grizzly bear, is going to show up before at least the middle of the afternoon. Well, we went in there about 10 o'clock in the morning, and the bear is there. And he's on the bait. And we had the cameras covered with plastic tarps, and it was cold and frosty, and they were very noisy. And I don't know yet to this day what was wrong with that bear, but we'd make a little noise, and he'd look up, and then he'd go back to eating. He must have been terribly hungry. Well, after about a half hour of this, the producer said, okay, go shoot the bear. Well, the cameraman handed me a coil of wire. He had a directional microphone taped to a tree real close to the moose that the bear called down. And he had wire coming back along the creek and across the bridge and up to his sound machine that he had with the cameras. He said, would you mind, well, he had disconnects. He made pieces, you know, and there was a disconnect in the middle of the bridge. And he'd taken it down the night before, and he said, would you mind, as you cross the bridge, plugging in this wire? Well, the suspense is really getting high, you know, and the bear can see me. I had to crawl across the bridge on the hands and knees, and I had the wire in my mouth. I had my bow in one hand, so I had two knees in one hand to hobble across this bridge, and I could not find the end of the wire that I'm supposed to plug this thing in. And I crawled back and forth, and you can imagine the suspense. The bear is down there, and everybody's ready. Well, I finally found that on the other edge of the bridge, the bear had been on the bridge or on the tree at night playing with it, and they all had it all tangled up. And I had to untangle it and plug it up and go in and shoot the bear. Well, Bendig had told me, I want the bear stand on his hind feet when you shoot him. Well, I'm telling you, this is the absolute truth. And I said, well, okay, I'll whistle, and he sometimes will stand up. Well, I whistled, and he stood up, and I shot the bear, and everything went fine. We got the picture. Some of you, I guess, have seen it, and everybody was real happy. Well, we did a scene that was never used, wound up on the cutting room floor. We had a beautiful log cabin, new log cabin, made with notched corners and the whole thing, out of spruce. And the bottom log was about 20 inches in diameter. And when you cut a door on a log cabin, you don't cut the lower log. That's the thing that holds it together. So we had one scene, had two cameras set up, sound man there, and we had a fire in the cook stove, and a fellow in there with a handful of balsam boughs. He was going to shove them in the fire, get smoke coming out the stack when the director yelled action. And I was to come out the door with a knapsack and a thermos bottle. And Bill Love, our guide, just a peach of a fellow, I'd hung with him. We shot 7 times. And something went wrong every time. At one time, well, first I didn't close the door. And the director said, cut. And he said, Fred, I want that door closed. Yes, sir. Well, at one time I came out, and in lifting my leg over the log, I closed the door on my foot. And it put me in an awkward position, and I didn't want the film used, and he didn't yell cut, so I've got to kill it some way. So I said, Bill, would you like some moose droppings in your coffee? Well, Bill had been studying his lines all night, and he's not going to muff it up. He said, I'll have mine black. I went on a polar bear hunt with the ABC crew, and this same fellow, and he said to me, I don't want to see any blood on that white hide. I'm supposed to kill a polar bear without any blood showing on that white hide. And I did it. It turned out all right. All right, now, I'm going to tell you a story that I wouldn't tell anybody except Bowhunters, and I hope none of you writers put it in print, because fair chase, I guess, really wasn't thought about. This was 20 years ago. Anyhow, I had to make 3 trips, 3 polar bear hunts to get a bear without a bullet hole in it. And the bears would charge you after you get an arrow in it. And on one of these hunts, the hunt was over quicker than we expected, and we had arrangements to go brown bear hunting with Ed Bilderback, we were going to meet in the city of Kodiak following the polar hunt. Well, the polar hunt was over sooner, so we wanted to get out of that ice box. Polar hunting is not fun. It's cold and dangerous. And so we came down to Anchorage to idle away a few days. It was in the spring of the year, spring bear hunt. So we went down to the Fish and Game people and asked them if they'd seen any black bears coming out of hibernation. And one of the fellows said yes, he'd seen some up in the south side of the mountain up Turnagain Arm, and that he was going out there the next day and he'd take us out if we wanted to go out and hunt. Well, I was to be the photographer. Bob was to be my photographer on the brown bear hunt. And if we saw black bears, it was to be his little job. I'm getting my stories mixed here. I'm partly into the next story I'm going to tell you, but I'm a little bit screwed up. Anyhow, we went out Turnagain Arm. He dumped us off, and we climbed a mountain, and it was flat on top and tundra-like, spongy, and just had a hillock here and there with a few trees or some brush growing out of it. And we saw a moose, a cow moose, in one of these thickets, and I wanted to get some film of it. I was the photographer, and Bob was the hunter when we were after black bear. If we were after brown bear, it was reversed. And I wanted to get some pictures of this moose, and we did a pretty good Indian job and got up to about 40 yards of it. And I shot all the film I wanted. Normally, in a situation like that, I like to sneak back out, and I get certain satisfaction in the game not knowing that I'd ever been there. But Bob jumped up in the air and waved his arm and yelled. And what we didn't know is this cow moose had a calf. And a cow moose with young calves can get kind of nasty, and this one did, and she started after us. Well, we were started running for another hillock about 200 yards away that had one lone tree on it. And my legs were longer than Bob, and I got there first and laid claim to it, and got up the tree, and he's coming thumping along with the moose behind him, and there had been a tree blown over in years past, and there was a hole under the roots. So I yelled to Bob to duck in the hole, which he did. And as soon as he's out of sight, the moose is over pounding my tree and hitting it with the shoulder, but I'm all right, I'm high enough. And by that time, Bob is out of the hole and making a turn around the tree, and the moose after him, and he's ducked back in the hole again. I thought, that's kind of funny. Well, when he was out of sight, the moose would come over to me and try to annoy me, and well, by that time he's out of the hole again. He's making another turn. I said, for God's sake, Bob, get in that hole and stay there. He said, I can't, there's a bear in there. Now I'll tell you the other story that I got a little mixed up in. Was we were hunting with Ed Bilderback, hunting brown bears from a boat, from a commercial fishing boat. The boat was 57 feet long and about 25 feet wide. And we had a skiff that we'd put overboard for going ashore. And we were cruising up along Prince William Sound, and we saw 3 black bears on the beach. Well, it was agreed, if we saw black bears, that I'm to be the cameraman, he's to be the shooter. Brown bears, we reversed. So we anchored the boat, went ashore in the skiff, and made a sneak behind a point that came out on the beach to where these bears were. There were 3 of them. And we were about 40 yards from them. And Bob Munger, my partner for many hunts, is not known for his prowess with the bow and arrow. He's one hell of a hunter. He's got eyes like an eagle, but he has to get pretty close. And we got about 40 yards from these bears, and they were busy, and there'd been a storm. There was a bunch of kelp there, and they were digging in it for goodies, dead fish and whatnot. And I shot film. I shot a roll of film, and I loaded the camera and I said, okay, Bob, start shooting. Well, he started shooting. And the arrow would go by and the bears would watch it, and the arrow would go by the other side and they'd watch it disappear in the future, in the distance, and he shot all his arrows and all mine. And about the time that all the arrows were expended, the bears decided there certainly must be something wrong, and they ran in the woods. Well, there was no use taking the camera in the woods because of the dark spruce woods, and there were trails, game trails, mostly moose, I guess, or bears. And I got in there, and we gathered arrows up and sharpened them and went in there and got separated. And I got to taking off after a bear that just poked along ahead of me, and I could never get an open shot at him. We came to a pond about 150 yards in diameter that was frozen over except for 5 feet around the edge. It had begun to melt, and the bear crossed that. And when I got out about the middle of it, I got a shot at the bear, and I thought I had a pretty good hit. I thought I could hear ribs clicking, and the bear ran off. And just about that time, I heard claws scratching, and there's another bear coming down a tree that was right in front of me. And I thought, well, doggone it, here's Bob's bear. He needed the bear to get into the Pope Young, and he needed it real bad. Well, I ran and barked and yelled and kept the bear from coming down the tree. He stopped, about 50 feet up, and then I yelled for Bob. And finally, Bob and Ed Bilderback, the guide, and the second guide, Harley King, came over. And when they got there, the bear went right to the top of the tree, and it was a big Sitka spruce. And I knew we had problems because Bob's accuracy wasn't too good. So we figured out the angles and placed Bob where his arrows would fall on the beach. And we set up a relay system where we'd bring the arrows back and sharpen them. And this thing went on for about an hour. He finally got an arrow in the bear, not very deep, but just hanging there. And every once in a while, an arrow would hit the rock. Be some rocks on the beach, and that's the end of the arrow. And finally, after about an hour, there were no more arrows. And I said, to heck with this. And I went out and thought I could pick up my bear just a short distance, but it turned out he was gut shot. And I had a hunt around, and I finally jumped him, and I ran after him and yelled and barked and got him up a tree. And I didn't have any arrows except 2 blunts. So I thought of maybe getting him back of the ear with the blunt. But then I thought, well, no, he'll jump out of the tree and I'll never get him. So I yelled for Ed. And finally he came over. He said, what's the matter? And I said, well, I got a bear up a tree and I haven't got an arrow. Bring me an arrow. He said, there aren't any more. And I said, listen, you go back to the beach and bring me an arrow. Well, he was gone for about a half hour. And finally came back with an arrow, hit a rock, and the point was all curled up. But I carried pliers in my knife kit, and I straightened it up and sharpened it and shot the bear. He fell out of the tree and broke that arrow, so we're back to no arrows and back to the tree. All right. Ed had a M1 carbine. He had a clip of 20. And he said, Bob, I can go up to this other tree. There's another tree about 30 feet from it. I can go up that tree and shoot the limb off that the bear's on. Bob said, don't you shoot my bear. He said, no, I won't. Well, Ed went up the tree, and he shot 19 times. He said, I'm saving one for myself. And he never got the limb shot off. And he came down the tree, and he said, Bob, I didn't get the limb shot off, but I got an idea. If you go up that tree, you're right just 30 feet from the bear, and you wouldn't have any trouble shooting him. Well, we had 2 problems there. Bob wasn't too anxious to go up the tree, and we had no arrows. So back to the beach we went. And we found one of my microfied arrows, a full-length arrow. The knock had bounced off, just the tapered aluminum thing had stuck out, and we didn't have the converter points in. The point was gone, but then we found the front end of an arrow that had a point on, and I cut it off about 4 inches back, and I filed it up both sides until I could split it. And Bob always has a roll of black plastic tape in his pocket. So he split it and put the shaft over it and taped it there, and he went up the tree. Well, he got up there and he yelled down. He said, he's not in the right position. Well, Ed said a bad word, and he got a pole about 6 feet long, and he went up the tree the bear was on. And he got under the bear and began poking him, and he said, "Now, Bob, how do you want him? You want him facing you or what?" Well, he finally got the bear broadside, and Bob shot a good arrow, but there's a place right under the backbone and above the lungs where you go through, and there's nothing there, and that's where you put the arrow. So we got a problem. And Ed was getting mad, and it's about 3 hours going by that time, and we were all pretty disgusted and wanting to end this thing, and it was beginning to get dark. And Ed got the bear poking the bear, and the bear was batting and biting at his stick, and he kind of poked him out on a limb. The bear's going out on a limb backwards, and Ed's right behind him, going to work him out so he falls off. And Harley King and I are down at the bottom. We don't have any arms. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute." So we went over to the beach. We each got ourselves a club. We're going to get the bear in our lap. And finally got back, and Harley King, who was afraid of even a little cub bear, he wouldn't even come near the tree. But I had to brave it off, and Ed finally worked the bear off the limb, and he killed himself in the fall. And that's the end of the story. Hey, great. Well, that's the end of my talk. I just want to say what a wonderful time I've had being here today, and how fortunate I feel to be invited to be part of this group and to speak to you. I was in New York here just a couple of weeks ago, and I got an award for some damn thing, I don't know what. And I told them, you know, all my life I've been doing things that I like to do. I've been having fun, and I get awards for it, and it doesn't make sense. It's just like giving a kid candy for being naughty. And that's the way I feel about being with you tonight. Okay, thank you all.
I think we all agree Fred has been a naughty, naughty boy for all these years, and we've all loved it. Every bit of it. We have another award. It may be a silly award, but it's from our hearts, Fred. The Fred Bear, an appreciation of a lifetime of conservation and archery activities, and we love you.
Oh, here, thank you. Hey, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's an honor to have you here, Fred.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay.